Hello, everyone. Welcome to this midwinter podcast broadcast of This Week in Science, the weekly science podcast. Oh, we're here again. We're so glad to have you here.
Technically, it's not winter yet. So
that's right. Yeah, the solstice is this coming
want to
weekend.
get real technical about it. It's not
late
yet.
fall.
I'm in Denmark. It started snowing like a month ago, maybe 2.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, welcome to our winter
the autumnally
episode. Go
challenged. Thanks, Blair. All right, we're all here for you tonight. We're glad you're here, and we're about to get this show on the road. Just want to remind you that we may have technical difficulties along the road, but those will get edited out for the podcast. So if you really don't want to deal with those, just subscribe to the podcast so you don't have to deal with them, and that's great. But otherwise, we're glad you're here for this. Everyone hit the likes and the shares and everything. Get us in the algorithms. Are you ready for some science?
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, let's do this show thing. Oh, no. No, Android, no. Go to sleep. Okay. Sorry. All of a sudden, the AI search was going to just start doing things on my phone. So I've turned that off. We don't want that happening. Oh, my. We're ready to begin. In 3, 2, this is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 998, recorded on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. What will TWISmas bring? Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Kiki, and tonight on the show, we will fill your head with slowness, insomnia, and frosty. Let's start that one up. Fill your head with slowness, insomnia, and Frosty the Neanderthal. But first,
Twist-claimer, all the way. 'Twas the night before Twistmas, when all through the house not a study was stirring, not even on a mouse. The stories were linked on the website with care, in hopes that the science soon would be there. The Patreons were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of Kiki whispered, "It's all in your heads." And Blair in her corner, and I in my rant had just settled our brains for a tight 90 bant. When out on the web there rose such a clatter, I sprang from my couch to see what was the matter. Tore open the rundown, threw open some tabs, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a podcast reminder. A new show was near. That lovely old podcast I never do miss. I knew in that moment it was time for more. We wish you a Merry Twistmas. We wish you a Merry Twistmas. We wish you a Merry Twistmas. And a Happy New Year. Good science we bring to you and your kin. We wish you a Merry Twistmas and a Happy New Year. On This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kiki and Blair.
and a good science to you too, Justin, Blair. Welcome back. And everyone else out there, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of This Week in Science. Yay, Blair, you're here.
I'm here.
Yeah, welcome back. It's the
Thank you.
whole gang all together
Yeah.
for this, like we were discussing pre-show, not midwinter program at all. No. This is the end of the autumn. We are bringing the autumn to a close, and it is almost time to ring in a brand new year. How did we get this far?
What's
We
coming
got
is
here.
even more scary.
What is coming? Uncertainty, that's for sure. It's all about science. Woot woot. All right. I have stories this a week. And Justin, thank you for that incredible twist claimer. That was very festive
Yes, of course.
and well presented. I give you all
Oh,
the
yes, yes.
props. Yes. We could flock that one. Let's see. I have
This is
stories.
what we were talking about in the pre-show. Like, when writing the disclaimer to disclaimer that or whatever that involves singing in some sort of thing, there's no practice. There's no anticipation that someone will actually, who is me, will have to perform it. It's just like, oh, this would be good, and you
You're like,
write
this is
it.
a problem for Justin in 10 hours, not now.
That's tomorrow, Justin's problem.
Yeah.
But I can write it clever. Oh, writer Justin is like, oh, this would be clever. And then today Justin gets it and is like, what? They're singing? I gotta sing this? This is
Well-
ridiculous. Whose idea? Of course, it was mine, but not the one that was gonna have to do it.
Well, present Justin, you performed wonderfully.
you.
Past
I
Justin,
survived it.
did you a solid with some solid
Well,
writing
listen.
there. So well done. I have stories about debating a mirror verse, new old moon findings, slow thinking, and being alone. What did you have for us, Justin?
Oh my goodness. I've got just in time for the holidays, and speaking of what the future will bring, why cats will kill us all.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got some frosty Neanderthals, a sleep study that hit the snooze on registering, its clinical trial, and
No.
why what you eat really does matter more than you think it does. It really matters. It really matters. Even more than you think it does.
Oh,
What if
all right.
I already think it's important?
It might be even more important. than
Okay, all right. I can't wait to hear.
And Blair, what is in the animal corner today?
Oh my goodness, I brought some terrifying squirrels, and not just because they're squirrels. Everyone will be terrified, not just me
Oh,
by the story. And then I also brought some slanted giraffes.
Slantia giraffe.
Yeah, what do you call a giraffe on an angle? You find out in Blair's Animal Corner tonight.
I'm already like assuming it's like the trees in Benicia. Like it's just really windy where these giraffes are, so they're all.
Oh my gosh,
off
this
to one
story is
side.
just going to be a Gary Larson comic. I have it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's already taking up that space in my head. Oh my goodness. Can't wait to get there with everyone. And if you all would like to share information for the holidays with your friends who enjoy science, family who might appreciate or, could benefit from some science, you can send them to the internet where they can look for This Week in Science on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Subscribe to our channel and get notifications. In fact, this is something you could do on the holidays. Every party, every gathering, every stocking stuffing moment. Just borrow your friends' devices, your family's phones, those iPads, those whatever. Get into their accounts, get them to log in and, just subscribe them to TWIS wherever they like to subscribe to their media. They have things they follow. They could follow more. What better surprise than a morning of TWIS? Notifications
for it.
galore. They will thank you later. We do usually broadcast Wednesday evenings, 8 p.m. Pacific time on those channels, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. We're also found all over the interwebs as a podcast, wherever podcasts are found. And our website is twist.org, where you can also find our Patreon and Zazzle store links. Anyway, that was enough of that. You ready for the science?
Yeah.
The actual science? Okay. Let's dive in. There was a massive article that was published in science this last week. Do you both remember my stories about the mirror enzymes, mirror life, enantiomers from this past year and previous?
Is this like in Star Trek when everyone has a goatee? Is that because that's the mirror
Basically,
universe?
it's that
Is
universe.
that the same thing?
But just enzymes. So it's
Not-
like, what
Yeah.
could go
Yes,
wrong?
but no.
Man, it's really
Yeah.
hoping. Okay.
So there have been some studies, one specifically this past year, in which researchers were able to get RNA and amino acids to keep copying itself, and building copies of itself. So it was enantiomers are basically left-handed and right-handed versions of molecules, mirror images of one another. And normally in life, our bodies use one side. We're usually left-handed for our amino acids, and sugars are right-handed. DNA is right-handed. It's a right-handed screw thread in its little twist. This chirality, or the handedness of the enantiomers, the molecules, determines how they act in biology, whether or not they are a puzzle piece that will fit into the right spot in the puzzle of life. And so it was very interesting, this group that was working on the enantiomer study, because it's like, ooh, okay, we know that there are these chiral molecules. An article published in The Conversation this past week, the researchers bring up past molecules that have been used. Thalidomide, for example, it has two forms. One form treats morning sickness, and the mirror version causes birth defects. And so if you don't know which is which and you're giving a mix of the two, then you're going to potentially be causing problems to pregnant women, which was a very huge issue for a long time. Medical treatments are often chemicals, molecules that are built to be a particular chirality or handedness, so that they will interact with enzymes or with proteins that are in membranes to be able to allow processes to take place. And our bodies recognize them because it's all that chemistry, molecular chemistry puzzle that's going on. So the idea that you could create very specific handed molecules that are not recognized by the body normally, that the immune system doesn't attack and doesn't break down, they could become long-acting treatments for very specific disorders. So you could build and create a molecule that is specifically recognized, but by the target molecule to have a specific effect. But then the rest of the body is like, whatever, I'm going to ignore you. You don't even exist to me, right? Because it's the wrong-handedness for our immune system to even want to pay attention to. So this is exciting, but over 40 scientists just got together to publish a 300-page monograph going through all of the arguments and rationale for why mirror molecules are a really, 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 I'm not going to say it 300 times, 300 times really bad idea for science to be working on. The big argument is that, yeah, okay, these things do exist in nature, left and right-handed molecules. It's not a big deal. But if you start creating self-replicating molecules that find eventually some or act upon or use some kind of quote unquote food source, energy source, so that they can maintain what they're doing and then not be policed like the rest of the stuff that we're putting in our bodies, it could end up being very bad news for biology as we know it. You think you're doing something good, but then what if that treatment that slips by the immune system starts doing other things? Because as we know, chemistry finds a way.
The thing that really scares me about that is when these mirror molecules get into the wastewater and get into the ecosystem. That's really the thing that's scary. I mean, the first thing I thought of was Ice 9 and Cat's Cradle. Because all I could think of was like, oh gosh, like what is it? What if there is some sort of cascade that
Mhm.
happens in nature that we're not anticipating? That's just oof.
So
Yeah.
that's a very good point. I feel like once you are in the world of nature, something will find it and destroy it.
And that's
I feel like if there's
and
enough,
that's an argument for
I
sure.
think
But
that but that's also like an argument that like I think it'll be fine. I don't know why.
Right,
I
because
don't
it's
know what
worked so
will
well
fix
with
it.
plastic so
It'll
far in
probably be
nature.
okay. What could go wrong? Yeah, I'm sure. You know. So that's not a very convincing argument even on my own. But the thing is, like.
Justin's just fighting himself now.
You're like,
No, but I meant like, but within the body, the human body. If we're just limiting it to that for a second, then you would have to essentially test it against everything. It would have to be a full body like testing to see if there's interactions that we're unsure of, and then you might even have to, like you say, create a kill switch or a counter devolving molecule that then goes in and
right.
like it becomes that arms race that naturally happens in nature, which has all the resources of time in the universe existing to work on these things, whereas a research project can get shut down and you can get halfway, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that is, okay, one molecule that's used as a treatment in a very targeted situation. This is something you can set it up. You can create a kill switch. You can have it is very specific in nature, and we do this already with other molecules that we know they're very specific. We're working this way in genetic modification using CRISPR, Cas9. We're doing very targeted therapies, but there are groups out that are actually trying to work on building mirror organisms from the ground up, synthesizing all the biological molecules to assemble functional cells. And this is really the thing that these 40 scientists writing in Science are fearing the most. So the treatments, the single molecules, those aren't necessarily the concern, but they are steps on the path to, creating a mirror amino acid library, creating a complete mirror proteome, a mirror genome, mirror synthetic organisms, which are completely programmed to do what we want them to do. But once they are existing on their own and evolving as life does, as organisms do, what then are the controls on it, and how do we make sure that it remains controlled? Could it be that mirror bacteria could end up causing disease as opposed to curing it? Mirror viruses, any mirror bacteria would not have phage viruses that are the natural controls. It wouldn't have any other bacterial competition.
Yeah,
There
but
is
then
nothing for it
would
to,
it
and if it
also
has a
have
niche,
like
it's got a niche. It's gonna go.
yeah, but then its niche is also is its niche then compromised in the first place? Meaning, can it still have binding sites that work? Can it still get into a cell? I mean, like
No,
the
but
whole
this is the thought problem, right? It's a what if.
and I don't
This
understand the
mirror biology is
self-replicating
it's still like
aspect.
yeah, this is
Like
still over a decade away, but
what is the self-replicate? Like it seems like almost a separate issue. Like even if you did that with a unmirrored cell, that it was like self-sustainable, self-replicable, and nothing like.
so
I
it's
feel
different,
like
but it's different from the synthetic biology that we're already doing where we're trying to design bacteria. Other bacteria are going to recognize the biology of that bacteria. There'll be phages that interact with the molecules in those bacteria. The synthetic bacteria that we create are all based on the basis of life, of all other life as we know it. This would be life that is not necessarily recognized, and so there's no check and balance on it. Whereas, life has evolved in the way that it has already, and it has its own checks and balances. Sometimes those things go out of control and go off balance, but
But
you know,
that's also the ecosystem that you would try to put this thing in. Like if you were trying to
you
design this to exist and you made it the wrong-handedness, you would think, "Oh, I totally messed up. It can't eat anything."
but
Right?
no, but that's the
If
thing.
that's
If you did give it something to eat and it figured that out and it could survive on its own, wouldn't it evolve? Don't we know that about life? That life mutates, life that can replicate as long as it has a food source. This is what we've seen over and over and over again. As long as there's a way, and generations and changes and replication take place, adaptation happens, evolution happens, and maybe it would
but
die out. Maybe it would.
well,
What
so
if?
here's the thing. Then we're going to the creation of life, and this was actually kind of interesting then because then we're creating life that has a chance to evolve on this planet, where no other form of life, all life is evolving on the planet, but all other life is also fighting against everything else, having taken up all of the food web,
Mhm.
all the niches, all the things, and so there's no room for a new life to start on this planet because every role and job is taken up, and
Competition.
everything is food to something else.
Right.
You create something that has a specific food source that's allowed to evolve. You would be essentially creating new life on the planet that might have a chance to get a long way because its ecological niches would not be filled already. And that seems like a great thing. Like, that seems like it could have some real possibility in a billion years or whatever, but still,
There,
I'm not worried at all.
don't be worried. Don't be worried right now. And nobody should be worried right now. This is like, this is off at least a decade, probably more, because everybody always says 5 or 10 years, whatever. But this article that has been published in Science and the technical work that goes behind it, the researchers do say this is not something that could evolve from existing life, but this is if we were to create it. Immune defenses and predation typically rely on these interactions between chiral molecules that could often fail to detect or kill mirror bacteria due to their reversed chirality. And so it appears plausible that sufficiently robust mirror bacteria could spread through the environment unchecked by natural biological controls and act as dangerous opportunistic pathogens. In an unprecedentedly wide range of other multicellular organisms, including humans. But again, this is all what if. This is theoretical, it is philosophical, but I believe this is right in line with the responsibility of scientists to bring their concerns into the published literature for everyone to debate and discuss, and perhaps scientific community checks and balances will be created along the way.
Well, in some
Blah,
ways,
blah,
not in others. And then,
Well, what about cats? We've got tons of checks and balances for
so if
those.
you want to find out, if you really want to like have some doom and gloom, what's going to end the world? It's cats.
Why? You're
In
always
world.
what? Cats aren't ending the world.
Well, they might for complex life mammals anyway. University of Pittsburgh researchers have identified evidence of H5N1 adaptation in cats, domestic cats.
Mm.
This is this is interesting because this story is going to mirror something that we talked about, I think, almost at the beginning of this year, which was the outbreak, the H5N1 outbreak that they had discovered in cattle. One of the things I remember from that report was the farm, the first alert that set up some antenna there was that the farm cats all died off. And they noticed that there was also dead birds on the property, but it was all of the cats on the ranch were dead. Like and in that study they found cows had the H5N1, some humans were sick, but there wasn't this idea that there was any sort of mammal to mammal or human to human transfer. It wasn't that the cows got sick from the cats. They didn't think. They thought it was all this avian flu that was getting into everything.
Mhm.
Okay. South Dakota, almost the same story. This is a bunch of cats. 10 outdoor cats in rural South Dakota were found dead.
Hmm.
Some of them were exhibiting respiratory neurological symptoms. They did an investigation on the cats, and they found the H5N1, which is in the current clade, which needs a name still. Maybe we should call it the TWIS virus. It's the
I don't like that one.
2.3.4.4.B virus. Because we're used to now like Omicron or whatever. Like we got names for these things when it comes to COVID. We got to start naming the H5N1 versions, because 2.3.4.4.B is just not going to roll off the tongue anytime soon. Anyhow, they did all sorts of genetic analysis, and they found the H5N1 sequences previously that they had identified in South Dakota dairy cattle were the same here, suggesting possible spillover from cattle or the infected birds directly. Here's the thing.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Right? So what's the big deal? Well, so the big deal is that cows don't get the regular human flu. Cats do. If cats have the regular human flu, get the common cold, and have the H5N1 in them at the same time, that creates one of those vectors where transmutation and sharing of things between the versions can take place. They're very concerned. I'm underestimating this. But they said that cats exhibited widespread co-expression of sialic acid receptors compatible with both avian and human influenza virus binding and lung and brain tissues, a receptor co-expression that may enable cross-species transmission.
Ooh.
Yeah. Findings confirm H5N1 clade twismus can cause systematic infunctions with severe neurological involvement in domestic cats, evidence of potential virus adaptation, including unique mutations in key viral proteins, raises concerns about the virus's ability to cross species barriers and adapt to mammalian hosts.
Well, we already know that it does cross from avian to cow. So we've got the cows getting it. We've talked about other species on the farms getting it, and maybe there's multi species, lots of mammals are getting it. But is this really the like cats, because they're much more similar to the human immunome? A cat's got COVID-19, similar to dogs. Is this much more of like, well, if cows got it and got it to humans, maybe it's not going to spread human to human. But if
we
cats
don't know
got it,
we don't know that humans got
then
it
it's
from,
more likely.
Yeah.
Oh, we
do. We don't know that humans got it from cows. So far, what they suspect is that all of the exposures have been avian to mammal. If it
except
can go
for
mammal,
except for cow milk, there has been spread in from non-pasteurized milk that they've seen, for sure.
But I don't know that I know they've witnessed it. I don't know if anybody's gotten sick that way. That I don't know. But the point is, once it goes human to human, is really what everybody's the most afraid
worried about. Yeah,
is because I don't know if anybody can really predict how quick a human to human spread virus would spread. But my guess is it would be pretty quick. It would go pretty much ever. I mean, we'd have to take some very drastic action to prevent that. I'm not sure we got it in us.
I think there was a field study about this like 4 years ago, maybe.
I feel like too. Like, yeah. I feel like I remember reading something about it. But
yeah.
Yeah, and maybe other countries will be better prepared than we are here in the United States for
I'd like to think that
Maybe
everyone
even
will do a better job next pandemic. I
there will
hope.
be another one. Just
Yeah.
wash your hands, wear your darn mask, everybody, if you're sick. Don't go out if you're sick. Stay home if you can. If you have to go out, wear a mask. Take care of yourself and others. It's not so
But
hard.
so that's the main concern though here, Justin. Am I understanding correctly that that H5N1 and the human influenza
Or mammalian influenza, yeah.
mammalian influenza will somehow like the transmissibility of the influenza will then end up rubbing off on H5N1 in cats as a
It says
vector.
here, if harboring both the avian and mammalian virus simultaneously, cats could act like mutation mixing vessels, posing risks for genetic reassortment and the emergence of novel influenza strains capable of cat to human infection.
I'm not acting skeptical at all. I am honestly curious of when this has happened before. Because I'm assuming that this has happened before, if that's what they're worried about, right? Is that a vector has acted as a mixing pot for viruses.
So we saw it in minks. We saw it in we saw it quite a bit in actually during the entire what was it called again? There was that study you were talking about from a few years ago.
No, but you're saying there was a recombination that happened between two viruses in minks? I don't remember that. I just remember COVID being in minks.
No, that was one of the big concerns, is that ferrets and minks, that they could pose a risk because of mutation and also similarity and spread to humans.
I see.
Right. So there was mink to human transmission.
Right.
And so yeah, maybe I got too far down the line on that one. Maybe the ideas that would have been the earlier the wet market theory behind it, which is that there would have been
that's where COVID came from.
That's where that's not where it came from. It would have been in bats, but not getting into humans. But that it needed to, right? It needed a couple of extra mixing vessels before it had the right combination to unlock humans.
Okay. But I mean, not that I expect you to know, the entire history of virology forever, but I'm having trouble. Like, I'd like to hear of another situation where this happened. Again, I'm not acting skeptical that it could. I totally believe that. But I'd be very interested to hear of a situation where this did occur in a lab or in the wild. Right.
So zoonotic, we would have to just Google zoonotic virus.
But a zoonotic virus is not just by being a zoonotic virus what you are describing, where two distinct viruses kind of rub off on each other to change their contagious nature, right? Yeah. That's what I'd want to see. And so, hey, listeners, if anyone has the answer to this, please send it to me, because I'm very curious. I really want to hear if this has happened before, because I'm not saying that this is like overblown or anything, but it does sound, like it's a sure thing, like it's possible. Right. And so I want to hear when this has happened before and what the circumstances were, and because it's very interesting and it's something that I haven't really heard about before.
Well, right. Here's
so
the other.
Yeah, it has to do with those protein parts of the RNA of the virus itself. So the H5 is the avian part, and cats can get it when they eat a bird, or they come in contact with it, and it's usually over 50%, 60% fatal to cats that can catch it.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. Right. If it kills them, then they're not going to be spreading it.
The bad pathogen, which is good.
Right. The actual fear with that, it would become slightly less lethal. Right. If it persisted longer, if it didn't kill its host right away, if H5N1 just takes on a less lethal reaction so that it persists longer, then its ability to spread becomes much, much greater. The fact that these cats seem to be dying off like right away is actually the thing that's protecting away. Yeah. This is the same thing that was going on with MERS a while back. That was like a 70% or something like this, like fatality rate, which and very quickly, and so that the one of the main reasons that didn't spread was just that it killed the hosts so quickly. So hopefully it stays super lethal. There's a problem with that was the biggest problem with the COVID is that it didn't kill.
Mhm.
If it killed, I mean, it did. But I mean, if it killed more effectively and quickly,
Yeah.
then they would have encountered a lot less people.
Yeah, and one of the last thing to say on this also, again, is coming back to the raw milk, unpasteurized milk. There has been suggested in this one article I'm looking at here out of the University of Maryland's Public Health Department in April 2024. For the first time in dairy cattle in Texas, farm worker contracted the disease after interacting with sick animals, and 2 farm cats that were fed unpasteurized milk also became infected. So, if you have a cat that goes outside and has contact with wild birds and mice on lands that have chickens, backyard chickens and poultry can also be a concern. And this unpasteurized milk can be a real concern for spreading the virus.
So keep your cats inside. Drink
I thought I'd
pasteurized milk.
get that in there. Yeah.
And also, hey, if you have birds, maybe put a net over them for right now. If you go to a lot of zoos right now, they have a lot of their birds in indoor enclosures to prevent transmission from wild birds who are flying in. So
interesting.
This has such terrible implications on a story we're going to get to in the animal corner too. Oh God.
No. All right. In an idea paper published in Nature today, researcher Francisco Nimo and his co-authors out of UC Santa Cruz propose an explanation for a discrepancy related to the potential age of the moon. Now everybody's like, yeah, okay, the moon. The moon is about 4.35 billion years old. Our solar system was formed. Things were going woo, happy. Earth was starting to get going. They crash, moon stuff. And 200 million years after the formation of our solar system, hey, look, we've got a little planetary companion, a moon. That's very cool. Yay, Earth. But some people don't like this timeline, and they think that there is other information out there, and that by 200 million years, a lot of the debris that was out there and that little planet, our partner planet that merged with us and spat out the moon, maybe it shouldn't have been there. And anyway, this idea of a collision causing the moon, they think it's improbable. And they predict that there shouldn't be any lunar rocks that are older than 4.35 billion years because they should have experienced a reset of their crystalline structure because they were remelted 4.35 billion years ago. Because of that, the Earth pulling on the moon, it would have heated it up, and there was upheaval, geological upheaval and heating, volcanic activity on the moon. And so the true age of the moon might have been masked in this this press release is great. It says masking the moon's true age with what could be likened to a volcanic facelift. So anyway, lunar rocks that we have on the surface of our planet may not actually tell the true story of the age of the moon, because if the moon was all hot and bothered 4.35 million years ago and its rocks got melted all over the place, then any rock that we find here is not going to ever appear any older than 4.35 billion years old.
But
because it was soup, basically?
Because it was soup. because it
Okay.
was a rock, and then it turned into soup, and then it was a rock again. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. It's like saying the age of a butterfly only goes back to the chrysalis and not to,
Okay,
I
I
guess,
like that.
the
Excellent
caterpillar
metaphor.
before it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Really good. No, that's super helpful, actually. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. But
Yeah.
can't we just
So,
go get a moon rock and date that, like from the actual moon?
right.
Do we
And that
have
is,
those?
we do have those. Yes, we do. Apollo missions brought back a bunch of moon rocks. And there are Chinese missions to the far side of the moon that are going to be occurring where we could get different rocks from the moon. And uh, the remelting of the moon, they say, might explain why there are fewer lunar impact basins than they should expect, because those impact basins might have been erased by that volcanic hot and bothered facelift that it got.
Mhm.
The authors suggest that their explanation and what they're putting forward in their paper, the formation of the moon occurred between 4.43 and 4.5 billion years ago. So adding age to the age of the moon, pushing the timeline back. And so they do suggest ideas on how to test it and how to explore the effect of tidal heating, volcanic heating that would have occurred as a result of the gravitational tidal forces of the Earth's pull on the moon over time on the moon's geology. And they've got a bunch of models and they're doing simulations, and then they want to look at rocks. And really, they're like, hey, we can't ever just take this story at face value.
So
Why can't they just look at the moon rocks? I don't get it. Why can't they just look at them? Why can't
Well,
they just look
because
at that
they need
and
new
compare
rocks.
it to the moon rocks that are on Earth and
but it would
go,
be the
these are the
same.
same or these are
What they would
different?
what they would be saying is that it's the same because it was the moon itself. The whole moon was a molten thing, not just the
Yes.
rocks that ended up on our surface.
Yes.
But then, like, how is that not the age of the moon? Unless you're like, there was a slight transition. I mean, the universe is 13 plus billion years old. Of course, everything came from somewhere and existed before that. But I think you
But
call it the
they
moon
didn't
when it
cool at the
emerged
same
from the
time, right?
molten.
There'd be a pretty big difference in when the Earth cooled and the moon cooled because they're
Yes.
such
Different-
different sizes. So you
Yeah.
could still compare the two
Mm,
and say there is a discrepancy here.
okay.
Yes, which is what they are suggesting.
Right. I'm saying do
and
that
so,
before the paper is what I'm saying.
so they suggest that is this heating and melting that reset the formation ages of most of our lunar samples while retaining an earlier frozen in shape. And they have evidence in the form of rare zircons. Um, and they think that their paradigm reconciles discrepancies and permits formation of the moon within a few tens of millions of years of solar system formation, consistent with dynamical models of terrestrial planet formation. Anyway, let's look at the moon again. It's not old
Okay.
enough. But if
Cool.
that's true, then that suggests that our concept of like Winthea and the impact occurred, with the Earth, that potentially it puts the timeline back even further than what we thought. Which
And there's too many stories about the moon and floating around that I didn't read. But I thought there was also like a whole idea that that didn't happen. Like that the moon wasn't a
there
chip
is
off the old block.
that's another yes. There's another idea. Yes, there are multiple hypotheses. Right, we've talked about the moon being spat out of Earth when there was a
After some
giant
impact,
impact.
right? Yeah.
Yes, but the chemical molecular evidence so far suggests it supports that there's a lot of commonalities, but there are other hypotheses that do say, oh, well, it was just clumped up, that it got swept up and gravitationally bound. So there are multiple ideas as to how it was formed, and the thing is, you got to keep looking at all the hypotheses, because remember, science never proves, it only disproves. So as many ways you can come up with to study something and to test it, we do have to keep looking at all the evidence.
Yeah. Problem is, you can't prove that to me scientifically. That's
Yeah. Tell me another story, Justin.
Oh my goodness, what have I got here? Okay.
Oh, did I never show that? Oh, I did. Never mind. Go ahead. Sorry. Bloop.
Neanderthals. This is like a one of my big pet peeves about Neanderthals, is that they are often referred to as adapted for cold weather.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the places that we find them aren't cold weather at all. In fact, a lot of places we find them are by coasts, and they're going out and getting shellfish or eating snails, and they're all through southern Iberia. They're in the Levant. They're in all these warm climate regions, even if you're going back in time. And when we do find evidence of them in far northern locations, typically the understanding is that they were there during the summer. Like they didn't stay in Siberia through the harsh winters necessarily, but that they visited during the summer when there wasn't snow everywhere and when the game was out there eating grassland food or whatever it was. So this has been a pet peeve. Now, how do we show this one way or the other? Well, what they did is they looked at a rib cage. One of the best preserved rib cages is from the Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq. This comes from Shanidar 3, which is one of the Neanderthals that was found buried, which is definitively they were buried, although for some reason it's still slightly controversial. This is the one where they thought that, it looks like they were also like flowers were laid with them. But then it turns out, well, probably not. Probably wasn't flowers. This is a whole separate thing. But the flower pollen that they found likely came from bees, because they have burrowing bees. And so bees make little holes, and that's where the pollen gets into the soil. But what was interesting then is that bees tend to do that right away to upturned soil that's already easier to dig into, which means that this gravesite was likely exposed, and then like a day went by before it was covered up again. So it's even actually more evidence that they were buried, even if it's less evidence of, flowers or what have you being laid. Anyhow, back to the current story. They used one of the Shandar 3, which is one of the buried Neanderthals in that cave. And it's like a perfect specimen in that it's pretty well preserved, but also because it was buried, all of its parts are there in an articulated manner. So it's not mixed in with other bones through a wash or something where it got pushed down a river or slid down through a cave system. It has not been picked at by animals that have run off with various bones. Because it was buried, pretty much everything's there. So Shandar 3 is buried for 45 to 60,000 years. We opened it up, and they do a virtual reconstruction of the rib cage. They're taking all these measurements. They compared it with others, and they find that, yes, they have longer ribs that create this sort of bell-shaped thing, where the torso it kind of looks expanded with all these bigger, longer ribs, which I think added to greater lung capacity and that sort of thing. They compared it with current modern humans, and they did 58 globally distributed modern humans that were grouped by climatic adaptation, some who lived in cold temperate areas, some who lived in tropical areas. And these aren't just current modern humans. They kind of went back in time. So some of this is ancient Norse people, Inuits, in Greenland. This is, they went back through our fossil record, because now people live everywhere and it doesn't matter. People aren't necessarily always exactly adapted to where they live, as I will attest, having mostly Mediterranean bloodline living in an Arctic region. It's
Right.
not quite designed for this. And what they found was basically that there is a correlation. The cold adapted humans share a lot of that larger ribcage design with the Neanderthals. However, the Neanderthals that they're studying are from Iraq. And another one that they used in the comparison was from Israel.
Which
These were not ever Arctic condition locations.
no, but I mean, what year? I mean, how far back are we looking at these fossils? Are they
45 to 60,000 years.
okay? So what kind of glaciation was happening at that point in time? Because there
In
was
Israel?
yeah.
If
I
it
mean,
got
it's
down to
always-
Israel, then it was pretty much.
I mean,
it
this
would've
is
been-
not snowball Earth. I know that.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the argument could be made that Neanderthals, for whatever reason, decided to go and live in the Arctic for a very long time and developed a larger ribcage, and then came back and down to more temperate locations and just didn't switch back. That would have to be the argument for saying cold adapted.
Yeah.
The other more likely explanation based on these comparisons is that the Neanderthal build was just because of their body size. And it happened to make them adaptable to any climate. So they were sort of already built to go to these places, which is why they went to them, right? The question that this begs, that's not part of this study, though, is that then for those cold adapted humans, is part of that adaptation a convergent sort of appearance where the larger rib cage, or is that actually borrowed? Like, oh, here's something that's handy. We'll keep this around because it worked, and selection pushes forward that.
I'd love to
That
know,
trait.
right? When we talk about people who are more barrel-chested or adapted physiologically, morphologically for living in the Andes or living in very cold places, what are the traits, and are the genes actually de novo? Have they been, evolved, like you said, convergently, or is it that they are Neanderthal genes that just weren't the ones that were being used for a long time, but then came in handy because they were, kind of in the back pocket of the genome, and got expressed when they needed to be.
Yeah, and this looks very much like, because Neanderthals also are thought to have initially developed in the Levant up through territories in Iran, and then in sort of the Georgia area and those sorts of Caucasus areas, and then moved into Europe. So it would be a much bigger trip to have gone all the way up to an Arctic region, evolved with larger ribcage, and then come all the way back down the pathway of Neanderthal migration.
But all they had was
achieve
time
this.
back then.
And they had hundreds of thousands of years
Yeah.
to do these things. The thing is, it's much more likely that their build just allowed them to go everywhere without a lot of hassle, without needing to change anymore.
Does the
Yeah, we don't-
ribcage
yeah.
have to do with that, or could it be for literally any other reason?
Right.
Well, it's larger lung capacity. It's also their body size. They're stockier as it is, so it makes sense that they just have a larger rib cage. They may have required, whatever other pressures there could have been that would lead to that in terms of.
Well, could it
how
have to
they're
do with
using their
the way
arms,
that
or-
they moved in some way? Could it
Mhm.
have to do with the muscle attachment? Could it have to do with the fact that maybe they needed a lung capacity for a completely different reason? Vocalization.
Well, Hey,
Yeah.
they invented fire, so maybe they were, or excuse me, invented the harnessing of
I,
fire in a controlled manner. So maybe they
I
were
do
just
think
like
it's
got the big
interesting.
lungs, like, trying to get that fire
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
I do think the shape difference is very interesting, not just size-wise, but just the openness of the lung cavity that would be allowed by such a large rib cage, versus, I guess, the tidier, narrower, more compact structure that would be created by the human Homo sapien uh, morphology. I think that the differences are very interesting. And, anytime you look at just one reason, you're probably on this kind of thing, you're probably,
Mhm.
you're maybe right in some ways, but it's like, why can't it be both kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
Could be
That's,
more
I
than
mean,
one.
I can't help but in a study like this think about like just primates in general. This is just a primate, right? So when you think about primates in general, all over the world, what are the reasons that they could be slightly different shapes? And there are many.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are
Not
they
just primates.
brachiating? Are they swinging from their arms, right? Are they vocalizing more? There's all sorts of things going. I mean, when we look at living animals, a lot of the times if we're looking at cold weather adaptations, we don't look at their rib cage. We look at their body coverings, and we look at their circulatory system, and we look at other things besides that. So without the soft tissue, it's harder to identify kind of what is going on in their body.
Exactly.
I think a lot of this has to do, though, in this case, also with selection bias.
We don't have
So
that
a
many.
lot of the early research and a lot of the research that's been done on Neanderthals has been done in what are now currently colder regions. Findings from Germany up through Siberia are sort of like held out as they could handle the cold weather. They were adapted for this. They were different than us because they could do these things back then, whereas humans weren't there. But then it ignores all of the findings that we have found that aren't there. And so then it's just, you say if you have the same structure in a completely different environment, you can no longer attribute it to that environment. I'm trying to think of an example with the animals,
okay.
with the animals being like, oh, big cats, because we know about lions are
Justin,
adapted to
actually,
the open areas. But then,
I have
oh wait, we
something
find them
coming
in
up
jungles also.
that I think would fit this perfectly.
Oh,
Yeah, we don't have to continue to think about this right now
we
because
can
there
move on.
are
Okay.
some
No, I
painted
really
giraffes
do
coming
think
up.
I have
Yeah.
something that fits perfectly in what you're
Nice.
describing. So,
So everyone, let's all imagine what forces determined the morphology of the Neanderthals. Why did we keep what we kept within our genome? Oh, Homo sapiens. Oops, I turned myself off. Homo sapiens, 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 sapiens. Thank you for joining This Week in Science for another episode. We are so glad that you're here. We hope that you do have a good holiday season. And if you're interested in finding fun, sciencey things for your holidays, head over to twist.org and click on our Zazzle link. You'll be able to find all sorts of cool products that are arted up by Blair. Cool art, neat things. Maybe they will make a great gift for yourself or someone else these holidays. Also, this is a great time for giving. So our Patreon link over at twist.org, or there are also YouTube links as well. But Patreon is the place that we basically use for our community of support. So you can click that link, head over to Patreon, and be able to choose your level of support, $10 and more per month. And we thank you by name at the end of the show. And there is nothing better than giving the gift of TWIS. So, of course, help subscribe people to TWIS this holiday season. Thank you for all your support. We really cannot do this without you. We're going to come on back right now for more science with This Week in Science. And since we have our wonderful Blair back in the show, it's time for a little bit of music. to introduce this part of the show that we like to call Blair's Animal Corner.
She loves our creatures, great and small. Biped, millipede, no pet at all. If you want to hear about animals, she's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels, there's Animal Corner.
What you got, Blair?
Oh my goodness. I have expectation defying animals
Yes,
in
please.
the animal corner today. It's squirrels. I expect squirrels to be a menace. I expect squirrels to be conniving. I expect squirrels to be mysterious. I expect squirrels to be sneaky. But one thing that I do not expect squirrels to be is carnivorous.
What?
In UC Davis, which I really wish Justin was here right now.
Where is Justin?
Hopefully he's listening.
Yes.
In UC Davis, they have discovered ground squirrels hunting, killing, and eating voles. This was a study led by the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire and University of California, Davis. This was observations in 2024, which was the 12th year of a long-term behavioral ecology of California ground squirrels project. And this was conducted at Briones Regional Park in Contra Costa County. So not exactly UC Davis, but not too far. Out of 74 observed interactions with voles between June and July, 42% involved hunting small rodents by ground squirrels. So they were eating them. They were snackings on voles. So if you don't know,
every time I look at a squirrel now, I'm going to be like, what do you have in those chubby
I told you
cheeks
they
of
can't be
yours?
trusted. I've been saying this since 2009.
record.
I've been saying it on the
On the
internet since
record.
2012. But I've been saying it since 2009.
Verified on the record, calling
Yes.
squirrels.
You cannot trust squirrels. So they are eating meat. For those of you that don't know, rodents characterized as herbivores. It's their whole thing. And specifically, squirrels are considered granivores, so mostly grains and nuts. So funny.
Does this mean they're starving?
So good question.
Or evolving to omnivore status.
All good questions,
care
and I have
More
opinions.
resources.
So,
Okay.
lead author Jennifer E. Smith, who's an associate professor of biology with University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, and who's leading this study, said, she said when one of their undergraduate students came in from the field, told her what they witnessed, she said, quote, "No, I'm not sure what you're referring to." Then she watched the video and she said, quote, "I could barely believe my eyes." From then, we saw that behavior almost every day. Once we started looking, we saw it everywhere. So this is the question. Is this new behavior or has this always been happening? So I want to bring your attention to two other things. One, when a mouse is crowded or starving,
Mhm.
they will cannibalize. They will even cannibalize their own babies, which is
Mhm.
disturbing to discover as a teenager at the zoo. In your feeder rat drawer that's too crowded.
There was
Anyway,
something called, was it the Paradise Project? I can't remember the name of the study, but the idea was, what happens if you start off a small colony of mice and give them everything that they need and plenty of space? And it was like this sort of a sociology study. And it turned out like they were like all happy, go lucky, carefree until the population reached a certain point, and then they turned on each other.
yes. So mice and rats do this. We know that. We also know from previous studies that deer, particularly in lean times in the snow, will eat meat if they come across it. They don't hunt, but they will scavenge meat. So
And cattle.
all these animals that are herbivores, big air quotes, will eat what they find. Animals are going to eat calories that they can. End of story. The wild is a survival game. So what was interesting about this was that between June and July when this was happening, their carnivorous behavior peaked during the first 2 weeks of July, which coincided with an explosion of vole numbers at the park. This was they discovered by iNaturalist reports. So it seems like this behavior emerged alongside a temporary increase in the availability of prey. So was it easy food? Were the voles crowding out other grains that they would have otherwise eaten? Was climate change causing things to be too hot and dead?
Yeah.
Were squirrels learning how to scavenge because of human interactions and that there were other food sources available? There's a million reasons that this could be happening. My best guess is that squirrels always be eating meat when it's available. Squirrels are going to eat food when it is around. End of story. It is calories. So, like, what is the least amount of calories you can expend for the most amount of calories in your body? And what bacteria and processes do you have in your guts that allow you to process that food? That's ultimately what it comes down to. So if squirrels are able to eat meat, they are going to eat meat. So, like, Justin, this is directly related to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
They are defying previous categorization because there's an expectation of, oh, it's a little fuzzy rodent with ever-growing front teeth. It eats plants. End of story. And then they're like, oh, except for this one. Oh, except for this one. Oh, except for this one.
And then the
right.
other question is, would they eat birds?
Probably if they could catch them. Oh,
yeah, maybe. That's the question now. It's time to watch squirrels and see if they scavenge
eggs,
already dead
nests.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eggs, carcasses. Yes. Are they will
doubt
they
it.
eat are they gonna scavenge just any meat, or are they only gonna hunt, kill, and then eat voles? This is
There's
I
a
think
lot
this
of
is
them.
the beginning of a lot more information about squirrel diet than we are all ready for.
If the squirrels get H5N1,
Probably. Yeah.
then
We're in trouble.
because they
Yep.
go
I
everywhere.
mean, mice can. And so if mice, then
Yeah.
it was mentioned previously that, cats catching mice, that rodents on dairy pastures
Might have
had
been
been tested and positive for H5N1 as well. So yeah.
And that sucks because squirrels can
Mhm.
go places where rats and mice cannot, and also in broad daylight, because since they have a fuzzy tail, people let them. So it's more socially acceptable for squirrels to be around. You know it's true.
Vending machines.
Oh yeah, they're touching
What?
those. They touch every piece of fruit that's accessible to them, whether they eat it or
gosh.
not, right? It's just, it's tough. But anyway, point being, we don't know if times are tough for the squirrels or if this is something they've always done. More study is needed. But ultimately, these squirrels in this place are eating meat. And I think we are going to learn more as this develops.
I'm just fascinated by this because there are so many researchers who have been staring at California ground squirrels for decades, and that nobody ever talked about this before is.
Yeah. I will say
fascinating.
several of the parks that I work in are just infested with ground squirrels. And so now I'm going to be on the lookout to see what they're eating.
Yeah, but
I
we
think
know
this
you
is a
have
great-
an anti-squirrel bias, Blair. So you're going to say that whether you see 1 or 100. So
No, it's
kinda hard
actually true. There's one of the parks where if you try to walk on the grass, you will definitely break your ankle. And it's just like it's this lumpy, bumpy mess because of all of the
So
ground squirrels. It's
Griffith
crazy.
Park in Los Angeles
Uh-huh.
also has a zoo in the middle of this park.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
when I was walking through the zoo for the first time, I kept noticing the squirrels were everywhere in the zoo. And they were like going in and eating the animals' food and that sort of thing. And then I walked through one exhibit and I saw a giant squirrel, like a good 30-pound squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
And
No way it was 30 pounds, but sure. Yes.
It was.
I take
At
your
least.
meaning. It was large. My dog is 30
Wait,
pounds.
no, I know. It turned
So
out
it was
like
not a
capybara.
squirrel. Yeah,
Oh, it was a
capybara.
capybara. Okay. No, those are 50 pounds. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, okay. But But because I was like had
They
been
don't
tracking
understand.
squirrels, when I saw it, I was like, "Oh my god, that is the biggest squirrel I ever like." I had to like get
Yeah.
pointed out like this was completely.
Well, they
different
are rodents. They are indeed rodents. They're like giant guinea pigs.
Oh my gosh! But it
You're
was
very
like
sweet.
a terrifying moment.
Yeah. My goodness. Well, you know what's terrifying for a giraffe?
Falling over.
A 20-degree angle.
Oh,
But
what?
don't,
Okay,
no,
tell me.
that's not a joke. It's not a
Did
joke at
they
all. It's
discover
just a
the
science
tipping
story.
point?
So,
Is this a giraffe tipping story?
No.
unfortunately, maybe. So it turns out giraffes like flat terrain, and they do not traverse slopes of more than 20 degrees. This was a study where they analyzed the movements of 33 GPS-collared giraffes in South Africa, found that in general they avoid steep terrain, and that they are unable to go up a gradient of more than 20 degrees. That's most likely because of the energy required, because they're so gosh darn tall, and the risk of falling because they're so floppy. So this was a study from the University of Manchester and the University of the Free State, South Africa. They found that giraffes will tolerate a terrain easily of up to about 12 degrees, but only if it leads to favorable vegetation. They're really only willing to put in the work of going up that hill if there's some really good stuff to eat up there. Otherwise, they are on the flatlands. But if it's 20 degrees or higher, they just can't go up the hill. This is why this is interesting. So, at least in terms of scientific research, I will say, because also I want to once again mention there are humans that have lived in Africa for a very long time that maybe knew this already. But researchers, there hasn't been research done on this until now. And the problem with that is that science-based conservation efforts have not taken this into account. And so often areas that end up being preserved for conservation needs are areas that are not developed on or traversed often, which also are often steep, hilly, plateaus, like all sorts of variable space, right? That's the wild space. Think about the wild spaces where we all live, right? Like they're difficult to traverse as compared to the areas that have been developed.
Yeah, great for wildcats, great for sheep, not for
Birds.
giraffes.
Yeah,
birds,
exactly.
Wolves.
And so the problem is if you preserve a giant space for giraffes to go on, but there is an incline in the middle of it, you've now halved it. They're not going to use it. And so you might reserve 200 hectares, but there's a mountain in the middle. Oops, you've reserved 50 hectares for giraffes.
Only for the
right?
giraffes. Yeah.
Right. So this is not previously been used in conservation mapping, and so topography needs to be included moving forward. This is something that I hadn't really thought about, and once I read it, went, "Oh, duh, of course." But so this is something that might impact future conservation efforts. But the other thing I wanted to mention about this is that we've talked before on the show about the different species of giraffes and the different subspecies of giraffes, and that there are, some people say 14, some people say 7, some people say 3. There's all these different theories on how many species of giraffe there are. And if you look at a map, it almost looks like how a ring species look. Like if you look at a map of California tiger salamanders, where there's certain overlaps and there's maybe certain species or subspecies can't create offspring, but some can't. So it's very
At the
interesting.
opposite ends of the ring, like the
Right.
opposite poles of the ring, they don't really match up really well. But
Yes. And
the
so
subspecies
now
next to each
I'm
other do.
wondering,
Yeah.
is this because of physical boundaries? Is the speciation of the giraffe because of mountain ranges or plateaus or valleys that they're like, oh, I'm not going up there?
Mm-hmm.
And did this create this kind of separation over time of these different giraffe species? So I think that would be really interesting to look at, to lay the giraffe species map over a topographical map and see what's going on there. But I also think that this is not just giraffes. There's got to be other animals that don't like hills. And I think that we need to look at that more when setting up conservation areas for animals and conservation corridors too. What if you're trying to push animals through a space on their migration where they're like, I'm not going there? That's really important to know. Yeah.
I think we already should have known this. This is why Hannibal, the Carthaginian general, is famous for bringing the war elephants across the Alps. Well, he started with war giraffes as well.
They didn't make it.
None of them made it. They were like refused. This also, Hearst Castle. Do you know this? Have you ever?
Yes, Hearst Castle has zebras.
Zebras, but they had giraffes too. Now I'm wondering, because it's all hilly. Like, did they just like all stand in the same spot and not go anywhere?
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
Maybe. Well, they probably over time, one set of legs was longer than the other. No, I'm kidding. But no, I do think it'd be interesting to see if local individuals who have been in Africa for generations and generations and generations knew this. I do think that would be interesting, because historically, there has been a mismatch of Western civilization showing up in places like Africa and kind of like setting up conservation areas and kind of after the fact going, oh yeah, we probably should have talked to some people about this before we did it. And we're better about it now, I will say. Like, I do think the conservation community is way better at tapping into the local resources and local knowledge before setting up conservation programs now than they have been in previous decades and centuries. But I do wonder if local communities knew that giraffes don't like hills. And we're just finding out about it now because of these GPS collars.
I love it. Has to be technology to allow us to figure this stuff out. We couldn't actually have. Again, we don't know giraffes don't like hills. We didn't know that squirrels are eating meat. Okay, come on, everybody. Let's just go outside, get off your phone, start watching the animals a little more carefully.
But I also think in both of cases, this is something that maybe people have been watching the squirrels for 12 years. People have been watching giraffes for centuries. And this is something that just kind of never clicked, I guess, in these observations. Or, I mean, maybe the squirrel started eating meat last year. I don't know. But I doubt it. It's something that wasn't looked for, so it wasn't noticed, right? Yeah. And sometimes you have to look for something to recognize what's actually happening. And they were just like, oh, the giraffes don't like going over there. Maybe there's a predator over there. Oh, it's a hill.
The amount of tunnel vision that people have is greatly underestimated. This is one of the fun things that's been happening with the reports of drones in New Jersey.
Oh yeah.
Like, is you're seeing like people are posting videos where there's not even a plane. It's just stars. Like they just they're looking up for the first time.
Yeah. Or lens flare. Lens flare. Look at this thing. It's following. I don't know why it's just floating there. It's lens flare, everybody.
There's definitely drone activity. It's probably more so now that it's being made public. But it's also like, it was one of the legislators from the state of New Jersey posted a video talking about, I saw this myself, and there's nothing in the video other than stars in the background. That's all that is there. There's nothing else. And so I'm like, yeah, if you haven't looked up, you're going to be like, wow, there's a lot going on. But if we haven't been observing these behaviors, I love the fact that they'd never seen this before, and now they're seeing it all the time.
Yes, yeah.
Because now they know to look for it. They know that that's it. It's so.
Before they were just like, oh, look, that squirrel and vole are hugging.
Oh no, it wasn't a vole. Look, that squirrel's carrying its little baby somewhere.
Oh yeah.
No, that's not a squirrel baby. That's a meal. Hey, Justin, you have a couple of stories to tell us about really quickly here?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's start with this one. This one is, this is the wrong story. Let me see if I've got it in the rundown.
No,
there's-
not this one. That one. No, the other one. That one. Sorry.
So hopefully I got the right. Oh yeah, this is it. So this story was just sort of vaguely interesting because it is a form of vagus nerve stimulation through an electronic device that you attach to the ear. It's meant to stimulate the vagus nerve, and this was being studied in an attempt to improve sleep quality to combat insomnia. This is one of those studies that, though, is funded by the Chinese Department of Chinese Medicine or something, where they are trying to promote traditional Chinese therapeutics to the world in general, usually in combination with an existing drug. And so immediately when I see who's funding this, I get a little bit of this urge to drill down and look at it, especially because according to the study, this transcutaneous auricular vagus nerve stimulation has previously shown promise in addressing conditions like depression, epilepsy, and migraine, with emerging research suggesting it may alleviate insomnia symptoms. And so, and they find, they run the study. It was self-administered, 30-minute stimulation sessions twice a week for 8 weeks with a 12-week follow-up. And they find that, yes, it had a clinically significant difference in affecting people's quality of sleep. And that's the study. And it's a registered clinical trial, which also sounds good. But because, again, I've seen so many of these stories that have this sort of funding source that are trying to make the argument for traditional Chinese medicine, that I had to drill down a little bit further. And I looked at the trial registration. The trial registration is quite different than the study, in that the trial registration focuses on MRIs, multimodal magnetic resonance imaging, to observe brain mechanisms, structure, and function during this vagus nerve stimulation treatment, which is an intriguing thing. So then they want to actually see what is the mechanism, because a lot of these have to do with acupuncture or any of these traditional medicines. Either the components are such a big combination of things that you can't identify what's the source of that could actually be affecting a thing, or they're showing people reported better but don't have a mechanistic aspect to it. They're not pointing to, this is the nerve that was treated, this is why this worked from a scientific perspective, because there's also a different philosophy. What is it? Key energy that's being affected, which is not something that exists in Western medicine, so it can't be approached in a scientific paper. The problem is the registered clinical trial has the main investigative tool is going to be MRIs. It does a selection process on its cohort based on whether or not they are be willing to or have any condition that would prevent them from doing MRIs. And they have two control groups. In the published study, they have the stimulation on the ear, and they have a sham version, which is where he attaches a thing, but it's not actually sending the signal to the nerve. That's their control group. In the registered trial, they also have a healthy group that does not even do the sham trial that they're going to compare the MRI imaging to. So there's no mention of MRIs, though, at all whatsoever in the study.
So is this like like they did this bit and they haven't done the fMRI, or is this it? And the fMRIs didn't work, and so they're not going to report it.
So I think what happened was that this was supposed to be conducted during the pandemic.
Mm.
And so that's why it's not. I don't think that they did it and it didn't show a result that they like. I don't actually suspect that. I suspect that what happened was when it came time to do the study, the pandemic was in full swing, and getting people into a hospital to do an MRI was not a priority. Okay. The problem is now that they're published, they're still linking it to the registered clinical trial as a registered clinical trial. If you have the whole point of having a registered clinical trial is we're going to tell you in advance everything we're going to do in our investigation so that there can't be any, so that there's complete transparency, so that we didn't run 3, 4, 5, 10 experiments and then come up with a result we liked and published it. The whole point of pre-registering and putting out your cohort details, you're not even allowed to recruit under the, what clinical registration is supposed to be. You're not even allowed to recruit your first participant until you have presented your registered clinical trial protocols, how you're going to select, how you're going to do all of these things. So my problem with this study ultimately is that it's fine to publish. You need to point out that you couldn't meet your primary endpoints or use your primary investigative tools based on the registered trial if you're still calling it a registered trial. Otherwise, don't reference the registration because you have not followed it. And that's the whole point of the registration. Anyway.
I clicked on a link. I clicked on the link to the registered trial.
Oh, yeah.
And there it is, of course, it's a registered trial in China. This trial website has some kind of a floating message that keeps bouncing around on the screen.
It looks like the DVD menu thing.
It does.
What's
I'm
really
wondering how many advertisements.
Sorry.
Where's it going? It's actually a game of Pong.
What's really interesting is that is not what the link is supposed to be. It's supposed to be directly to
the registry. Yes, it's supposed to go directly to the registry,
which is too bad. Maybe they've removed it. I don't know.
I clicked on the link that is in JAMA. It's the one that was linked. Fascinating.
It's the say it again. Was that the one that was in JAMA?
Yeah, trial in the JAMA network.
Try the one
Chinese clinical trial registry.
Try the one. There should be a link in the study. Let me see if I.
Well, anyway, regardless, this is a fascinating. It just makes me wonder whether or not they will be adding an MRI study later, and this is an early part of the trial that we haven't gotten to. That maybe this is one part of the study and they're going to do more later. This is maybe something to keep an eye on for future publications.
In the study, they say that future studies should use that to get more rigorous information, but they don't say that they're going to. I mean,
it seems like somebody needed to finish their PhD and they didn't get to use the MRIs and they were like, well, time's up. Gotta go.
Look, there's plenty of reasons why, they could just lose funding.
So much happens. Yeah.
Whatever can happen, but then you have to say it. You have to point it out, and you can't keep referring to it as I don't think you should be calling it a registered
clinical trial. Yeah,
registered clinical trial if you deviated away from the registered protocol because it defeats the purpose of it. You call it a study, fine. It's a study. You did a study, great. Not a registered clinical trial at the point where you have altered all of those things. Even the cohort is different. Even the control groups are different.
Also based on what you described, it sounds like the placebo effect could be just so intense for this one.
Yeah,
which is why MRI would be so interesting,
right? Because if I'm just doing this, and I'm like, oh, I feel so much.
Yeah,
because I did something.
But that's what if you look at like this is slightly different acupuncture, but it was also an acupuncture study hospital that performed this.
Yeah, I saw that on the link that Kiki showed. Yeah,
if you look at acupuncture studies, they're just doing self-reported results.
Right.
They're not getting into mechanism, again, because there's a big disagreement on science and traditional Chinese beliefs in
Which
what
ultimately, acupuncture is not hurting anybody. Stimulating your vagus nerve is not hurting anybody.
No.
It's not like when you're taking bogus supplements or something like that where you could actually do harm to your body. But this is not great science, what you're describing.
But what I'm also describing, though, is that acupuncture is covered by federal health insurance. If it's actually not doing anything and we're putting insurance dollars towards it, that's a problem. The fact that there's no mechanistic evidence that backs it up is I think is a problem. Anyway.
Yeah.
On to
I
my
mean, that
last
gets
story.
tough when you're thinking about like if it is helping people, even if it's a placebo effect, if it is alleviating symptoms, then it is doing something.
Okay.
But that's I feel like we could talk for an hour about that. But anyway,
We could. This is a yes. But what about
what
what
we
we eat?
need is better
Just in-
placebos.
We need better placebos, yes, or to figure
Glenn
out why
Biggs
they work.
Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases at UT Health, San Antonio, Boston University School of Medicine, and the Framingham Heart Study have found higher scores on the Dietary Inflammatory Index are associated with an increased incidence of all-cause dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Oh gosh. So this is a crazy statistic. Dementia is projected to reach 152 million cases by 2050, according to the World Health Organization. So it's going to be an ever-increasing thing that the healthcare industry and healthcare providers are going to have to deal with. In this study, association between dietary inflammatory index score and incident dementia, published in Alzheimer's and Dementia, researchers basically found what I think is the most dramatic, albeit correlative, evidence for being careful of what you eat. So the scores were calculated for 36 dietary components, which were categorized as either anti-inflammatory, which was things like fiber, vitamin-rich foods, omega-3 fats, or pro-inflammatory, things like saturated fats, total energy intake, and carbohydrates. Things that had higher positive scores indicated more pro-inflammatory diets. They had 1,487 participants in the initial cohort. 246 developed all-cause dementia, including 187 cases of Alzheimer's disease. For every unit in their inflammatory food index, all-cause dementia rose by 21% with each point. 20% higher risk for specifically Alzheimer's disease, dementia. When this is the striking part, when the participants were grouped specifically on their scores, those with the most pro-inflammatory diets versus those with what you would call the most anti-inflammatory diets, there was an 84% difference in risk of getting dementia. 84% higher risk in the pro-inflammatory food group and the anti-inflammatory food group. That is dramatic difference.
So that the chicken apple sausage that I had for dinner tonight probably contributing to my early stage dementia. That's
We've been
now.
hold on.
talking about.
I feel like that's not that bad, actually. I feel like that's a pretty decent meal.
No, it's
for Kiki, that's about as processed food as it gets.
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Like that's her extreme.
And actually, processed vegetarian food, if you're eating meat, not meat,
Substitute. Yeah.
meat substitutes, those are incredibly processed proteins. They've had to be processed within an inch of whatever they came from to be something close to meat
Mhm,
for you
mhm.
as a vegetarian. But
Sometimes it's so good though. So, but here's
I'm not saying it's not.
so
Moderation.
this is my question: confounding variables. Do inflammatory diets often coincide with other lifestyle choices
Yes.
that could also be causing these problems?
Yes.
So that's an interesting question. The thing you would have to point to is an 84% correlation of a specific behavior that differs from the other group, right? Like they would all need to be running not just with their diet, but with whatever it is else that they
Well, what
do.
if some of them smoked and some of them didn't exercise and some, right? It doesn't have to be a one-to-one. You could have all these other things happening that could be contributing to this. I'm not saying that it's not responsible at all, but this is a really huge difference. And I think that I'm just saying, yes, the 84% seems crazy high to me. And I'm wondering if there are other things happening too. That's all I'm asking.
So if you look at the MINDS, I think it's called the MINDS study, which is like middle or Mediterranean diet, something or another. Can't remember. Now you're talking about a group of Mediterraneans who I just assume are all chain smoking, who are eating the anti-inflammatory diet as is the natural ecology of the diet there. So this is where a lot of these studies into processed foods sort of originate. Why was that diet so healthy? It may not mean that diet was necessarily anti-inflammatory or extra healthy. It just might mean that the processed food and the high inflammatory diets are having a negative effect. So depending on who you ask, you can say Mediterranean diet is great for your health, or you'll hear, actually, that's just how human is.
Right? Well, but also you recently brought a story the last time I was on about how the blue zones are nothing, right? Didn't that happen? So
yeah,
because those were all based on the Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
And the benefits of and that turned out to just be people weren't reporting their age properly. So I don't know.
I don't know what that I don't remember exactly what that story was.
Was that Kiki? Did you bring that story, or
no,
was
that was Justin talking about the blue zones being these places where people can live to really, really old ages. But really, it was just like nobody.
The age part.
Everybody's lying about being however old they are.
Right. I'm just saying, the Mediterranean diet has often been lauded as this perfect thing, and then we just had that story a couple weeks ago about how it's not true. Anyway.
Yeah, and exactly. So, but the point isn't that the Mediterranean diets make you live longer. It could just be that the Western high processed food diet is killing people sooner, and that's much more likely the scenario. And in this case, 84% higher risk of all forms of dementia. That is, like. The processed food thing is going to be I think the next round of, it turns out smoking's bad for you. Oh, it turns out, having that fifth of hard spirits every night after work is not good for you. Like, I think.
Haven't we already said that?
No, those we have.
Food is always going to be a problem.
4 out of 5 doctors were recommending you smoke a certain brand.
Food is always going to be a problem. Because you don't have to smoke to survive. You don't have to drink alcohol to survive. You have to eat food. You have to eat food. And you have to decide what food to put in your body. And sometimes that processed stuff is easier to get. Sometimes it's cheaper. And sometimes it just tastes good.
Sometimes it is living now. What do you choose, to survive now or survive later? These are all things that go into it. But could we all eat that terrible, terrible inflammatory diet if our health systems were better? I don't know. I'm not going to go down that road.
Oh, boy.
Because the thinking is just going to take me too long to think about all this stuff. And that's taking me to my last stories for the night. Researchers at Caltech University Marcus Meister and the Ann P. and Benjamin F. Biagini Professor of Biological Sciences, with their graduate student Jieyu Zheng, have just published a study in the journal Neuron related to the paradox of the human brain and human thought. They did a calculation of how many, well, not how many, but how fast can we think? How quickly can we get information from our senses into our brains and make things think faster, think bigger? Their paper is called The Unbearable Slowness of Being. Why do we live at 10 bits per second? Their paper is fantastic. There are tons and tons of assumptions involved in their math and how and how everything works out. But they've calculated, and they've not just taken it from previous calculations, which have come to a similar number, but calculated it themselves as well. But our sensory systems gather about 10 to the 9 bits per second. So we've got tons and tons of data coming in from the sensory neurons, coming into our brain. It's a virtual flood of information that's coming into our brains. And yet, our cognitive thought processes, according to their calculations, are only working at the rate of 10 bits per second. And that's the max. That's not what it's usually working at, because our brains are lazy and we have single track thoughts that rely on metaphor and heuristics and things we've learned and all sorts, our brains are usually working even slower than the 10 bits per second. That one track mind of yours, it could be going faster. And this could have something to do with another paradox.
Buffering or brain?
Yeah, which is why young kids are often like, they get into video games and they want to do things faster, 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 faster. Is that they are taking information, and even though they are doing single track mind as much, in their thought processes, they're using as much of it as they possibly can. And so they're actually probably using that 10 bits per second when they are trying to push their systems to their limits.
So I'm confused.
Yeah.
Because
what are you confused about?
I thought that when you used your brain more, it was called ADHD, and it was considered a condition that you're suffering from and not a superpower. I always think of it as a superpower. Like when people can be talking about listen to 3 different conversations at once.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, so ADHD, people with ADHD or neurodiverse people very often are probably, on that, that faster side of the spectrum. If you can handle more information and jump from one thing to another fairly quickly, that your processing
You want to take
speed.
a drug to be like me? Well, okay. I guess it's just choose your own adventure and what neurotype you want to be. There will be a pharmacological answer for you somewhere.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering about this particular, so it's a thought piece. It's philosophical. They do lots of calculations based on synapses and information transfer and what's actually happening. So it's that paradox. We've got all these synapses. We've got all this information coming in, and they say that we've got like this outer brain and the inner brain. The outer brain is dealing with all of that kind of stuff that doesn't have to be thought about, the stuff that it happens without us having to really be conscious of it. The inner brain processes, these are reduced, and these are more related to controlling our behavior and things that we actually have to maintain cognitively. But across all of this, they don't really, the math works out, and that's nice. They can do proofs, and the math is nice. That's great. And they've used a lot of cherry-picked stuff to support their ideas. That's good. But I feel like they're missing a lot of some of the more recent work on, or I don't know, this is just, I don't know. I feel like there could be more work looking at the Schrodinger or quantum aspects of our neurons, right? That there are modes of information flow between neurons that are not relegated to traditional synapses, that we are learning more and more about short distance informational flow based on glial cells, that we understand that there are
And immune system cells.
immune system cells. And beyond
And
that, there's even we don't even really understand the flow of electrons, down neurons, and there's a lot going on that is not specifically explained by traditional membrane physiology and membrane dynamics. Okay, so there are, as we're understanding more and more about quantum flow in wires, quantum flow in systems of electrons, there is, I think, much more interesting stuff that could actually more fully explain this paradox of
you have to
brain
be
speed.
fair, because
I'm going to guess it's not just 10 bits per second. Their math
no,
is
but
nice.
you have to be
but
fair
there's
to the
something.
folks with the nice math.
Yeah,
Which is that they used your field's current model.
constraints,
Hey,
boundaries. Yes.
that's what you guys said was going on. We just worked off of that. If you've got new stuff, fine, we can fix it later. but based on what you've told us so far, this is how we did the calculation.
Yeah. But still, there is this question on the from the outside, looking at our brain and the information that goes in. There is a 100 million times difference, this huge ratio, a gulf between the info that goes in and what apparently is being used and processed for actual behavior.
Is that why I can listen to 3 conversations and follow them at the same time? But if I'm
Yeah.
reading, I can't hear somebody talking to me.
Mhm.
Is that what that
Yeah.
is?
This sounds a lot like when we used to say, "Oh, you only use 10% of your brain,"
It
and then
does.
that
It's
was
like
largely debunked.
but now it's all information speed because of computers, and so now it's not 10%, it's 10 bits per second. So anyway,
Sure.
this is my opportunity to bring this information to light and say I don't like it, and I'm not going to go along with it.
Regardless of how much percentage of your brain you're using, it's what percentage of that is actually using critical thinking that counts. Not.
Yeah, and
This
what
is
percent
This
of
Week
it?
in Science, I don't like it episode, I think.
I don't like it.
Sensing a
Oh
theme.
God, this is going.
My last study for the night, I do like it because this
Oh, good.
is what percent of your time are you really using to recharge? And how do you recharge? Do you spend time by yourself? Do you like to spend time reading or doing things on your phone around other people, but not engaging with those people? Do you actually like engaging with those people? Alone time is important for a lot of us for recharging. Justin says no.
Justin and I don't get alone time. We both have toddlers right now.
Yeah.
I have a 13-year-old. He says, "Go away, mom."
Right.
So
You get
mine's
lots of
enforced.
alone time. Maybe more than you
So
want.
much now. Too much. Yeah, so researchers just publishing, it's from Oregon State University and Ohio State. These researchers surveyed about 900 adults across the United States to look at their activities in how they used solitude to help make their lives better, not just as restoring energy, but also perhaps enhancing social connectedness, because you don't think of solitude as something that can enhance connectedness, but in fact, maybe it can. So your feeling of how connected you are to the world and how connected you are, maybe if you are the person who needs to go off into a cabin in the woods and be by yourself, that's solitude. You're not getting connected to the world. You're connecting to yourself. That's great. It's recharging you. But they suggested that there are various aspects to this where some people do really get recharge from being around other people, say at a cafe, going
Those
to
are
a
extroverts.
movie.
It's a very
No.
personality-based thing.
By yourself, though, not going and interacting with them,
Yeah.
but being around them
Yes.
by yourself.
You know what you
Like
call this,
some
you
sort
children?
of vicarious
This
energy
Parallel
vampire.
This is called parallel play. Yes.
Yes.
So I am playing with my Legos, and next to me is my friend who is playing with their Legos. We are not playing together.
Nope.
We are parallel play. This is actually developmentally something that happens before cooperative play. So this is all babies and children do this. And some people really enjoy doing it. I mean, I can guarantee you, we all parallel play with our significant others from time to time, where you're on your phone sitting in bed next to your significant other. That's parallel play.
It used to be actually reading physical books.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
as what I would call maybe an extreme extrovert, like I can't relate at all. If I'm like by myself for 2 days, I can no longer interact tonally or functionally with other human beings because I might as well have been in solitary confinement for like 3 months or something. Like I come out like, I forget how society works. Is my tone of voice right? Is it too loud? Like I stop like being able to just be a human if I've been alone for too long. And I get the opposite. Like some people get tired out from dealing with the crowds or the public or the coworkers or the friends
but
and
over the
family,
holidays,
and for me, it's quite the opposite. I get the energy from that, and then it's the alone times when I get drained. Oh,
fascinating.
This is yeah. So I think it's an interesting story,
Everybody's
but I'm
different.
wondering if they broke those groups by personality types, if they would have very stochastic answers, or would they get like very definitive personality profile following things? We're doing the rapid.
Yes. So what I was going to say is that they did, and in their looking at this, empirically testing this trade-off between solitude and implications for well-being, with different degrees of solitude, what they really came back down to is that if you go into, I'm going to go be alone and it's really good for me, you're probably going to get a really good experience out of it. If you're going to go into it thinking, I'm going to be alone, oh God, then it's not going to be good for you. So there is this sense of, yes, your personality type, but also your preconceived notion of what solitude is for and what the solitude is and how it's going to benefit you. So if you want that solitude because you need it, great. If your solitude is not actually solitude, that you need to be actually around other people, then that's what you need, right? You have to go into it understanding what it is that you need and what you're going to get out of it, and listen to yourself. And so when people tell you, everyone out there, I'm just talking to the general you should do this because this is the thing that the podcast told me. Tell them that isn't actually something that's good for you if you know it's not. Or say, hey, yeah, that's great. I already knew that. Thanks for the reminder. I need to go do that for myself after having to spend the entire holiday season with my family, whatever it happens to be. Just know what's good for you and what you're getting into. So if you perceive things to be harder, they're going to be harder.
If you're alone, but you're listening to this podcast and the conversation is going on with you in your head as well, like, are you really being alone or are you interacting? How does that work?
I
think it's
this
important
podcast is good for you
to
either way.
identify that there is value to being alone around other people. That is a thing. Yes. And I relate to that quite a bit. The idea that you can go to a coffee shop and sit and read a book and you recharge, but you're not sitting in a room by yourself.
And this is possibly, where a lot of what people came into with the pandemic, yes, Zombie Tom Hanks is saying, does TWIS chat count as parallel recharging? Absolutely. I fully believe that if you're sitting listening to this podcast by yourself, you're also with us. You're not alone, but you can be by yourself, right? You're also with the community if you're in the chat room. You choose to engage if you want to engage, but you're also by yourself, and maybe this is good personal recharge time. So
Blair,
yes,
I think
absolutely.
that parallel play you're describing in the cafe
Mm-hmm.
actually causes me anxiety. It's like my one source. It's like when
He
you get on
needs
an
the people to
elevator.
Is that
come
because
over
you're
and say
trying to
hello.
talk to everybody in the cafe and they're
I
giving you the
feel like
hairy
the
eyeball?
urge to. I constantly feel like the urge to, because it's like
That's
when you
hilarious.
get
I'm the
into an
person who's
elevator-
like, no, thank you. I'm fine here. Please
when you
leave me
get into
alone.
an elevator
Don't talk
and
to
you're
me.
traveling with a bunch of strangers, and there's that just awkward silence as you're like waiting to get out of there again.
Uh-huh.
Like that's what it feels the entire time I'm sitting in a crowded place without talking to anybody. Like that entire time I'm like,
I feel
I'm waiting for it to get to the floor.
elevators are
just gonna
weird
get
because
out.
you're all going your different places. What I think I love about cafes is that you're all there to be in a space, right?
Yeah.
You're there maybe to talk with someone else, but then somebody else is there to work next to you, but they don't want to be alone at home while they're doing it. Everybody's there to be there. They're not and I feel like the people who open themselves up to interaction in cafes are people like you, Justin, who would love to talk with people, and that environment gives that to them. But then it also makes it possible for people to be alone and not engage, but still around other people. So I think cafes are fantastic for
Go
it.
away.
No, so Justin, there's one
lonesome
other piece of
vampires.
this.
Go just be
that-
by yourself. Don't
without
keep
opening a
occupying the
whole-
public places where people are supposed to social gather with all of your. I'm out here in the public in a social
Justin-
gathering spot, but I don't want to talk to anybody because I'm antisocial in public.
There's a piece of
Just
this
go home.
that I think
There's
is
a place for
important
that.
to mention.
Home.
That I don't want to create a whole debate about, but I do want to mention that being a female presenting person in an urban space, it feels safer to be in a space like a coffee shop when you are alone. But also, you don't want random people, specifically random men, coming up and talking to you when you're there. That does not feel safe. And that's a very different experience than a male presenting person, specifically like a cis straight male person, could have a very different experience in those situations.
But I think the question here, so if there's, I think Vincent Fink is saying, what's the point of going out into the public if you're going to be antisocial? But there's, I think, a difference between being antisocial, which is completely like that you don't like, antisocial person is hiding, right? You want to be alone. And so that antisocial person is probably at home. But there are people who need a little, but don't want all of it. They don't want the interaction, but they need the proximity, right? It allows you to have solitude, but also not be lonely and not feel alone. So, I mean, I think that this is, something where there can be many definitions of this sociality in solitude. And I think it's wonderful that we have spaces where all of these things and all of us can come together to find what we need. I mean, I'm like thinking of the cafe example, and it's just such a wonderful, cafes are such wonderful safe spaces for that. You find the cafe that fits you, right? Each cafe has its own little culture that they foster. And some of them are loud and boisterous, and some of them are quiet and studious, and some of them are in the middle. And, it's just, yes.
Some of them judge you for your coffee order, and some of them don't.
And some of them are like being at a library with coffee. Like,
yeah,
right.
People shushing you with their eyes.
Some of them have board games and giant Jenga. There's, absolutely.
Yeah, and you can find the one that fits you and your personality. But I love our social spaces, right? The places where you can be completely pro-social, or you can find some little subset of that and find your space. And I think that's very important. And I just wanted to end the show on this with the understanding that we all need to find our spaces, and that solitude does not necessarily mean having loneliness, and that we can be alone together, or we can be together fully
alone.
Alone. I was gonna go there. I was like, wait a minute, what have I done?
What does that actually mean?
I don't know. It's, it's just words, lots of words. But, the holidays can be very difficult with lots of busyness and lots and lots and lots. And we all need to find ways in this time when our energy can disappear, like Justin, even though it's the very end of the show right now. And I was going to just do the end of the show because it's the end of the show.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to go do that. Okay. Anyway, yeah, we can find all of our energy and our ability to recharge the way that we need to. Don't, whatever. Do what you need to do, people, and know what's good for you. Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode. I'm just going to say it's amazing of This Week in Science. Did you have fun? I had fun.
Yes.
Have fun doing this show. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We always have fun doing this show.
Because it's an extroverted thing.
Extroverted, introverted, extrovert, whatever. I want to give shout outs to all of you. Thank you so much for being a part of our chat rooms. All of you who are parallel playing with us tonight. This is awesome. Everyone out there being with us with your solitude of podcasting with us. So you're not alone. Well, thank you for joining us. Shout outs to Fada. Thank you so much for your help with social media and show notes. Gord, Arnlore, others who help with the chats. Thank you for keeping the chat rooms great places to be. Identity 4, thank you for recording the show. And Rachel, thank you so much for editing the show. And I would be remiss if I did not say thank you to our Patreon sponsors. Thank you to Eden Mundell, Alan Viola, Aaron Anathema, Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Gertz, Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Coles, Kent Northcote, George Chorus, Pierre Velazar, John Ratnaswamy, Chris Wozniak, Vegard Shefstad, Donathan Stiles, a.k.a. Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Reagan Shubru, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, P.I.G., Stephen Alberon, Daryl Myshak, Andrew Swanson, Fredos 104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hessenflow, Steve Leisman, a.k.a. Zima, Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Britt Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, Drew Burton, Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Artyom, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul Phillips, Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Dostra, Jason Olds, Dave Neighbor, Eric Nat, Lon Makes, EO, Adam Mishkan, Kevin Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul Disney, David Simmerly, Patrick Pecoraro, and Tony Steele. Thank you all for supporting us on Patreon. And if anyone would like to do a holiday gift giving, you could give us a gift of joining us over on Patreon. Head over to twist.org and click on that Patreon link to support Patreon in an ongoing way. On next week's show, we're not going to be here. No, we're not. We're taking 2 weeks off, everybody. I will put some reruns up from years past. Yes, but we will be back in the beginning of January. I believe
January.
Yes, January 8th.
I just looked up.
Yes. And January 8th is going to be our 2024 year in review episode.
And predictions? Are we just going to do no new stories? We're going to do everything all at once?
Combo them.
Should we combo them?
I mean, considering it's going to be episode 999, I feel like we should.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do a combo. We've got 2 weeks to prep. Let's make it so.
Day before next show. Did you guys prep? Stuff going on. It was a holiday. So.
Oh, I want you to know that I went on ChatGPT this week and I was like, specifically prompting, what did each month and episode from 2024, what stories were discussed? And I was trying to get ChatGPT to tell me some stuff. Apparently, we are on episode 1025, and cool. We talked about stories that don't even exist. It's really
Excellent.
Amazing.
Thank you, ChatGPT. You're so good.
No, and then I was like, and then I said, so which was that real? And they're like, oh, actually, no, I was estimating and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God.
Excellent. I'm so glad that our nation's students are writing papers with ChatGPT. That's
I was like,
excellent.
you can't even. I was like, this is information. You're telling me this is information from the internet, and yet you can't use it. Okay. Anyway,
So
we have a whole website.
episode Justin, let's finish this up. Episode 999.
yeah.
We're not going to be back next week, but on next year's show, we will be.
We will be broadcasting.
We will be
again
back?
Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, live from our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. Whenever it is, we are back.
Hey, want to listen to us as a podcast? Perhaps while you wrap some presents in the next couple of weeks? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. If you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe as well.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes, links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org. And you can also sign up for a newsletter. Not ours, other people's. Why not?
We love your feedback. If there's a topic you would like us to cover or address or a suggestion for an interview, please let us know on one of our social media accounts. You'll find them. Or send us an email. Just put TWIS, TWIS in the subject line, or your email will be spam filtered onto the moon. And who knows when we'll find it, or even if we know how old the moon is anyway.
We don't. Yeah. No.
Yes. And we look forward to discussing more science with you next year. If you've learned anything from this show, remember?
It's all in your head. Merry Twistmas! Science, science.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be.
And we are in the after show, which is not going to be a very long after show. I mean, basically now we're just going to wait for Justin to come back again. And Blair's got to head out for child and babysitter.
Child, job, out home.
Yeah.
Let
All the
someone else
things.
sleep in this room before he has to do things tomorrow.
Sleeping is good. We like sleeping. I like sleeping. I want a sleeping.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Alarm goes off at 5 as usual. So
I look forward to hopefully not having a migraine tomorrow. That'll be a
Gosh.
positive thing. Yeah.
take rescue medication if you have it. That's my favorite thing
Mhm.
in the whole world.
Triptans on a Wednesday. I
Yeah.
was going to say Tuesday, but it's Wednesday. Triptans.
I wasn't allowed to take triptans until like a couple weeks ago, and now I can start taking them again. That and Pepto-Bismol, two of my favorite pharmaceuticals, back on the table.
Please. Thank you for making my life better again.
My head and my tummy,
Awesome.
my two biggest problems.
Aw. So many people's, really,
Yeah.
truly. Justin, we're not going to have a late night because I need to go to sleep, and so does Blair, and you probably have a long day of parenting ahead of you.
Today we will be very little parenting, but I do have a long day of choring to do.
Nice. I wish
But
my-
today is still. This is
People don't do chores in my house.
7:15 in the morning, and it is still pitch black outside.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like that here too, actually.
But but San Francisco
I'm
is
not in
also
San
covered.
Francisco anymore, Justin.
How
haven't
far
been
are
for
you? Are you no
years.
longer covered by the marine layer constantly?
No,
No.
Oh.
climate's best by government test is where I live.
Gosh. I don't even know where that is. I don't know
Is
where you
that
are.
really the town motto?
Yes, it is.
Oh my
You can Google it, people. I'm not going to say it out loud, though. I don't want to be doxxed.
That's fine.
That's hilarious.
This internet sleuths will figure it out anyway.
Sometimes you
Merry
gotta wonder.
Christmas, everybody.
Yes.
Sorry I wasn't on the Discord, everyone. For whatever reason, my computer decided that I was in a weird location and suspicious, and I was trying to log in the entire show, and now my Discord account is disabled for suspicious activity. Because I was trying to log in.
Don't be
Oopsies.
suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
I tried, really tried. But yeah, I hope everybody has a wonderful couple of weeks. Thank you for being with us throughout the year. We'll be back in the new year. We'll be on the internets in the meantime as well, in and out of those socials,
Not at all. Not
with a review of 2024. No, I was going to say 2023. What year is it again? I keep
We can
losing
review
track.
that. That would be
Honestly.
easier. I have notes.
Ugh.
I don't care anymore.
I don't know. Go get some alone time, everyone. Go parallel. Seriously, every time I go in a cafe now and sit down to read or whatever, I'd be like, I'm parallel playing.
Yes. I think about that all the time. That's not a new thought for me.
I'm not surprised.
I've honestly invited friends before. Like, do you want to come over, have some wine and parallel play?
I love it. Yeah. Let's all
Excellent.
Let's drink wine and sit and read books next to each other and not talk
Yes.
for hours. That
Excellent.
sounds like the best day.
So good.
Justin's like, no. Oh my God. All right. Justin, have a wonderful holiday. Blair, have a wonderful holiday.
You
Everyone,
too.
have incredible holidays no matter where you are. And we'll see you in the new year. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay curious,
Back in
and stay
2 weeks.
lucky. We're back in 2 weeks. Yeah. Good night.